What's up guys, it's Nino. So I get a lot of questions, people asking me when it comes to frequency separation, what are the differences between using median, which is popular and been used for many years now, surface blur, which still people use, and Gaussian, which is, for lack of a better term, the classic blurring operators. And I know that there are more, but these are three that mostly people use. And people have asked me, what's the difference? Why would you want to use one over another? That is a difficult question because it's not obvious. It's not like, oh, you use Gaussian for this kind of thing and you use median for that. There's no like direct list, no bullet point list of when to use what. So I'm going to give you a visualization and you can kind of get an idea. And then you can think, how might I use that differently? And you should experiment. Now, full disclosure, yes, I'm using the NBP panel FC3 for this. Only because I can cycle through the different blurring operators one by one very quickly. I don't have to rerun an action or anything like that, okay? Now, FC3 is great. You should definitely take a look if you want, but you can do this with your actions or doing it manually. But this is a cool way to get a visualization. So let's start the process. Let's go ahead and do a radius of 15 or so, roughly 15. My point is you don't have to have 15. This is just a demo, okay? I'm going to start with 15 on median and I'm going to run it. So let's run that. Should be very quick. There we go. Now, one of the greatest ways to demonstrate this, apart from like, technical visuals, is to actually do something on the actual image. And since skin is super popular, let's do skin. Here's a face. So in between the high and low layers, okay, I'm going to paint, that is, use the brush tool and use some skin tone to kind of overpaint the, her right cheek here, the camera left. Let's go ahead and overpaint and just kind of blend all these lower frequencies together, preserving that high frequency on top, of course, with the frequency separation. That's the entire point. I'm going to kind of clean up this overpainting in just a minute because this is going to be our demo. So I'm going to clean up the lips, make sure that the lips are masked out and everything, because it does work a little bit better when you have a little bit of a better visualization in terms of having actual, real world example. So let's do a mask. Quickly going to mask out the lips. This is not mission critical. Again, this is a demo. Maybe we'll mask out the nose, maybe the hair there, and the cheek down to the chin. Okay. Again, this is overdone, but that's the point. It went from that to that. Okay, whatever, it's done. Now, how do we visualize? Actually, you know what? Let me just fix one thing because it's bugging me. Let me add a little more lightness up here. There we go. Okay, so how do we visualize what's happening? Well, I want you to pay attention to the texture right here, okay? So because I don't have to rerun frequency separation and flatten, I can use FC3. I'm gonna give you an example of what that looks like. So here's what the texture looks like with 15 radius extracted. Let's go ahead and view what I painted. There it is. That's that brushed area that's super smooth. The texture is on top. You can tell because if you turn it off, it goes away. All right, so let's switch to 2. And hit play. Calculate it real quick. All right, let's zoom in. I know on video sometimes it has to rebuffer. That is too tight, looks fake, right? But you can see what 2 looks like. Let's see what 23 looks like. Okay, broader texture. That's 23. Okay, so you kind of see what's happening there. Now, let's try to do some basic direct comparisons. Let's put it back on 15. Ever so slightly tighter texture. Let's go to Gaussian and put it on 15. Now we can do this on FC3, but you can also run a separate frequency separation. Now you see what happened. I don't know if you noticed that or not, but let me turn it on and off. You'll see around these perimeters, the lips and the hair, there's some haloing. Can you see that glow right here? That happens off and on. And if I put it back on median and hit play, watch the glow go away. That radius, that whole haloing goes away, right? Now, what about surface? Well, let's go ahead and put it on 15 and 15. As you know, surface blur has radius and threshold as 2 parameters. Let's hit play. Get a slightly different feel. You notice how the hair over here, this thicker area of the hair, got more subdued in surface blur at roughly the same settings. If I put it on median and go back, the hair gets darker again. And that's just the nature of how the way the blurring works and how it gets extracted from the high layer. So if you go to surface, for example, if we put the radius really, really small and the threshold really, really high, you see what happens there. It starts to look a little bit like median, kind of fake, right? So let's go back to Gaussian and put it really, really tight, like maybe 2. It's a similar sort of tightness, but a different kind of flavor. Median at like a 2. Here again, very, very similar. When they get into the broader textures, that's when the differences make more of a difference. Okay, so let's start fresh and try to visualize the high layer by itself, because that's really the main difference, is how much texture we're pulling, if you will, from the low into the high. How much are we, where are we drawing the line where we do the separation, right? So let's go ahead and run it at like a 12 median. Let that finish. And now let's hit our button down here, H, so we can see the high layer. You can see all the texture that's in there. Okay, the gray, if sure, that's just the nature of the way the layer is calculated. The gray could also be any skin tone. So that gives you an idea of what the texture is doing. Now, if I put it on Gaussian 15, let's go ahead and let that finish. When I hit, you can see the haloing. You can see the haloing very quickly, right? And then if you go to surface, roughly 15 and 15. Okay, let's run that. Okay, hit H, hit H. And as you can see, we don't have as much haloing. We have a different type of haloing. What does all this mean? And how do we know what do we do with radius and threshold on surface? And why do we want to use median versus surface? And is Gaussian completely useless with all that haloing? These are all incredible questions that everybody asks me all the time. Let's go ahead and put the Gaussian on 30 real quick. Okay, so we can view that. You can see there's a ton of haloing. People ask me all the time, what does that mean? Okay, here's what I think you should try to take away from such a demonstration. Experiment with how the texture is recovered. It is more of an artistic decision than you might think. It's not just a literal thing. We've talked about in many videos before that we don't have one setting for frequency separation. We shouldn't anyway. We should adjust it depending on what we're trying to accomplish. That is on the radius setting. Pretty straightforward, right? But we also, in my strong opinion, based on my experience, we should also pay attention to the type of blurring operator that we use. Is there a monumental difference? Not really. Apart from the haloing that Gaussian causes, and it's a little more controlled than median, not really. There's nothing too radical. Gaussian, for me, for example, I find that it works at very small radii, 1, 2, or 3, for specific things that are not too often skin. I don't know, cloth or concrete, I don't know why, but I tend to have a decent sort of result when I'm doing little minor fine texture fixes with Gaussian. That's just my experience. That's worked well for me. Surface and median are very similar. With threshold really, really low, it doesn't make much difference on the radius. The radius is reveals how much or how large the affected area is going to be, sort of. And then the threshold is the intensity of it. So you have two factors there. They're very similar to median in terms of the algorithm. And then median is the popular one, I think, in my experience, because apart from protecting your perimeters, you know, not having really any haloing to speak of, it also has a way of preserving like specular texture and brighter texture. So again, with surface blur, we blurred that hair right here, and median will keep it. But you also might find that limiting if you're trying to minimize that. You see how this goes in circles, okay? Yes, FC3 is great, and yes, I think you should buy it. But at the same time, you don't have to. You can definitely have actions that run Gaussian, surface, and median, and you can use them depending on when. But there is no bullet point master list of which one to use depending on what you're trying to do. What I recommend is using them and playing with them, doing the demos I did today. You know, let's just go over that again. Let's say you come in here. We have, what are we? We have a median of, there we go. Let's paint. It's crazy. It's too much. Oh, actually, that's a Gaussian, isn't it? There it is. You can see how crazy that is. Switch it to median, hit play. And our, you know, our halos go away, excuse me, right? Switch it to surface, hit play. And we get a slightly different feel. You see all those sort of stronger contrast points and the specular points went away. Whereas in median, we can bring them back. See, very subtle differences. Play around with them and discover subconsciously which one you think will work depending on what you're trying to do. Again, there's no master list, but that is a quick demonstration.